I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013 meeting for the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Dr. Cash, would you do us the honor of leading our flag salute, please?
Please stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches, tenemos intérpretes en español. Si ustedes necesitan esa ayuda, necesitan el servicio, por favor comuníquense con nosotros en el cuarto que está aquí detrás. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. También, we also have headsets available for the hearing impaired if anyone is in need of headsets. We will begin our meeting with introductions, proclamations, presentations, and recognitions on behalf of the superintendent.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. Just have one thing to report, and that is tomorrow is the State of Our Schools address. That will be at the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion. And unfortunately, if you don't have a ticket, I believe it's sold out, but looking forward to sharing with our community the state of our schools in Santa Barbara, and we'll be posting the video that will be taken of that on our website, so anyone that cannot attend will have an opportunity to hear that. So with that, that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right. Board, comments and correspondence. Mr. Herron.
I'll just do one. A lot of things did take place, but the one I really enjoyed was the Santa Barbara Foundation's Man of the Year Award, where Bill Cerrone, our county superintendent, was named Man of the Year. And, you know, Bill has spent 30 years educating our children, helping to educate our children, and has done a very magnificent job. So I think it's a great honor for Bill, but it just shows the importance of him in this community.
And I will just add that I attended the South Coast Youth Gang Task Force along with our superintendent and Director Jarina. And the general report was that you would probably know the terms, but the students or individuals with gang terms and conditions is going down. So we were seeing a positive trend in the community. I think there was some reporting on that, but I did attend that on behalf of our district. I also had the opportunity to spend a day in Sacramento last week with the California School Board Association President's Councils. So a group of state leaders discussing primarily local control funding formula, the local control accountability plan, and district rollout implementation. So lots of busy work and important work happening. With that, we will move on to announcements of closed session action. And there is no reportable closed session action items. And now we will move on to general public comment. We do have a question for Germán Garces Gomez. We're not clear when you would like to speak for public comment. Is he? Charter school. Okay, great. Thank you.
We do have one other general public comment, and that is Karina Castro.
Hello. My name is Karina, and I'm a senior at Santa Barbara High School. I have been a part of the Friday Night Live Leadership Coalition for the last 3 years. The Friday Night Live Leader Coalition is a group of teens who come together from Santa Barbara High School, San Marcos High School, and Dos Pueblos School to reduce underage drinking and other drug use in our community at the school. One thing that I like best about Friday Night Live is working with teens from other schools to better our community. One of the campaigns that we plan every year to raise awareness about the dangers of drug and alcohol is our Red Ribbon Week campaign. We are proud to announce that members of Friday Night Live and Club Live at the junior highs have partnered with their youth service specialists and CADIS staff to plan awareness campaigns at each of the Santa Barbara Unified School District junior highs and high schools. Red Ribbon Week is being celebrated this week. Typically, we have over 3,000 students pledged to be drug and alcohol free during Red Ribbon Week. Those who pledged wear a red wristband as a promise to maintain our commitment to health and the safety of ourselves, our families, and our younger people. We wear a wristband to focus our attention on a common cause, the fight against tobacco, alcohol, and other drug abuse. This week we also have students leading classroom presentations which will reach hundreds of students with information regarding the benefits of choosing to be alcohol and drug-free. We also have fun activities planned during lunchtime to bring students together and promote being sober. We are here to ask you please to join us by pledging and wearing wristbands to show your support of the young people in Santa Barbara who are living a drug and alcohol-free lifestyle. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
We'd be happy to join you in supporting that. Thank you.
So we have wristbands for you.
Great, bring them up. I'm volunteering all of us to wear them. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Great. Well, thank you very much, Karina. And I think that concludes our general public comment. We will move on to the consent agenda. Board members, are there any items on the consent that you would like to pull? Mr. Herron.
Were you going to take E7 off the calendar?
Of consent?
Yes.
I was going to pull it, but you're welcome to pull it if you'd like.
Pull it for later discussion or
Yes.
pull it totally?
No, pull it for later discussion.
yes, okay.
Yeah. So I will pull E7 for a later discussion. Any other items? All right.
I'll move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do we
I'll
have-
second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0, and item E7 will come back to us at the end of our meeting. We will move, I have a time certain event. So I have a public hearing at 7 o'clock. So we were actually going to move to approval of single site plans for the elementary and secondary non-charter schools.
Madam President, this item is before you. Board members this past week had an opportunity in the board workshop to sit down with each principal of our elementary and secondary schools and listen to them explain the rationale for their single plan and also answer questions that board members had. And these plans have been approved by their site councils and their ELAC committees, so they're now before you for final approval. I believe the questions that each one of you had were hopefully answered in the workshop that we had last week.
Thank you, Dr. Cashboard. Ms. Parker.
Well, of course they weren't. We only had a few minutes with each principal. But as we went around, I know that we were saying to a lot of them that we'll come and visit and we'll get more of the details about a lot of specific questions that we had. We could only go over the most general stuff. But one of the questions I had, this is the second year that we've had with this sort of format, and the first time where it's been the board that's moved, and I was just curious to hear if you've had principal feedback yet on the process and how they're feeling about it as compared to previous years.
Well, I asked them point blank how to go, and I'll ask them again Thursday, but most of the principals love the format.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, board? Mr. Herron?
Actually, it's a great experience, but my personal belief is I'd rather see at least 2 board members in front of the principals at the same time rather than just one of us. Again, it goes back to my philosophy. I'd like to hear from my fellow board members as often as possible what's on their mind. And so we had, 2 hours, and I have no idea what's on your minds. I know what 8 questions I asked every principal, and I know what answers I got, and I know Margaret Christensen was with me, but I don't know what anybody else's concerns were, what their thoughts were, how they feel about the plans, what their hot buttons are. So I'd like to maybe look at a format where at least two board members hear simultaneously what's going on.
If the rest of the board's interested in that, that's certainly a framework that we can put into place next year.
Yes.
Okay, will do.
I'll still go back to something I've said for 5 years, is I don't know the process of how these are put together, and I've expressed to Dr. Cash, there are certain questions that, when I look at the answers from every school, it's the exact same verbiage. And I would rather see some of these forms, if they get a form, be blank with an answer so they can come up with their own answers. But there are questions that the language is identical, and that's impossible. You can't have a principal and his staff and a parent council all come up with the identical words. So a little bit more thought on originality. For the most part, they were great. I love Monroe. It's a total different format. But they have a special section on special ed, which I found very, again, very illuminating. But in general, I'm very pleased with this year's. I think are the best we've had in the 5 years I've been looking at them, but there's still room to go.
Ms. Parker?
You brought up next year. Will these exist next year?
Oh, my goodness, that's an excellent question. Really don't know. The State Board of Education has not finalized the regulations for the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. So the legislation is pretty clear that input is going to be required for the district's plan, and the district's plan has to, part of that, it states that school plans, it doesn't identify what they look like, have to be aligned to the district's plan. So I guess there'll be some form of plan that schools will have to submit. Whether it will be required to have board approval, I don't know, but I'm certain it'll require to have public parent input and probably parent approval. So I believe the LCAP regulations are supposed to be done by the end of January. Does that sound right? So hopefully in January I'll have an exact answer for you.
Any other questions or comments? I welcome a motion.
Make the motion to approve our single plans for elementary and secondary and non-charter schools.
Thank you, Dr. Buss.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Idelson. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We're going to move on to our board action on student discipline.
Okay, in case number 2013/14-03, I move to approve the Administrative Hearing Panel's recommendation for a full expulsion for one school year ending June 2014.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
And in case 2013/14-04, I move to approve the stipulated agreement for a suspended expulsion ending in June 2014.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So we still have 15 minutes before we have to do the time certain. So I am actually wondering if we can take on conference agenda item number 3, first reading of board policy high school graduation. And just so for the public knows, the reasons we're going a little bit out of order is because we have a time certain event item that has to be at 7. So I'm trying to put some short items for 15 minutes. It's a public hearing, so we have to follow the time. So we will follow the rest of the conference agenda items. Dr. Drati.
Good evening, board members and President Limon. Board Policy 6146-1 high school graduate requirement was brought to the Board of Education on May 24th, 2013 for the first reading for the purpose of clarifying the difference in graduation requirements for different graduating class years. The changes approved by the board at that meeting are in blue. Additional changes have been made to the policy after the May 24th board meeting and are indicated in red and green underlined. So you have a copy of it, and I'll stand here for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Drati. Board questions or comments? Ms. Parker.
Okay, Dr. Drati, I guess I just want to know a little bit about the background. This was decided on in committee, And what were the reasons behind the decision?
The original decision is reflected in red with a strike. About 3 years ago, the Graduation Requirement Committee met and discussed, as the district went through reduction in graduation requirements, they came up with a concept of including CTE as a part of the A through G requirements for graduation. And there's a Assembly Bill 1330, which allowed for career technical education to be a part of the graduation requirement in letter G. And so at that point, the district made a decision, or the Graduation Requirement Committee made a decision to bring to the board the opportunity for students to be able to take CTE courses as a part of that G requirement. In that discussion, we discovered that there needed to be some processes put in place to ensure that that Assembly bill was accurately adopted by the district, and but in that review, we discovered there were some holes in our process, so we went backwards and went back to revising the opportunity to do that.
Was there any controversy around this particular language, or was this something that sailed through?
There was no controversy, from my understanding, but we needed to come back to the table. Currently, the board policy that's before you is one that goes counter to the reason for that decision initially. The Graduation Requirement Committee now has come. They understood the reason why we need to go backwards because we didn't follow the proper procedures. But right now, we will re-engage the Graduation Requirement Committee and having that discussion to see if we can go back and acquire a policy that is within the spirit of that original reason for going there.
Thank you. Ms. Seidelson?
I've been involved in this quite a bit, but I would like to, at this moment, raise the question why we're still talking about units instead of credits on this. And that is, I note that transcripts at all our schools report credits, and report cards report credits, and most of our language in our handbook reports credits, but here we talk about units.
We can certainly look at that. That hasn't been a part of our discussion, whether we use credits or units, so we can certainly go back and look at that if you like.
And I will add, actually, I think that there's probably inconsistency throughout our policies with credits or units. They've been used interchangeably, and I think it's just a matter of when we get them and when we actually ask for a certain suggestion. So perhaps we just think about which term, I mean, it means the same thing.
Yes.
At least the intent is that it means the same thing, but which term we use, and just try to make sure that all of our policies are aligned with whatever term we choose to use.
Absolutely.
I have a
Ms.
question
Edelson?
for Dr. Cash. In terms of units versus credits, do most high schools, in your experience, use credits?
Well, that's a really good question. Yes. So, Ms. Limon is exactly right. We have, as historically, have been interchanging them. We can wait, or the board could maybe say change them all to credits or units, and we could go through and probably make just a change in all the existing policies that would reflect that, and I can bring that forward and have the board act on that officially at the next board meeting. Because I would agree. I think the issue that reflects probably might lead to a lack of confidence. You don't know what you're talking about. Are they credits or the units? And we should be consistent. And so, whichever one that the board would like, we'll make it so. Oh, sorry. I probably could still be picked up on Ms. Limon's mic. So I think probably I could just bring forward an action item, and you could, the board, if the board felt so, could direct us to go through and change them all in every policy to be consistent.
Okay, I think consistency is important because generally units, we're talking about college, and,
Yes.
and high schools generally are talking about credits, correct?
That is absolutely accurate.
All right.
But when you ask me if most schools,
Well, no,
that's my best guess.
Okay, all right. All right, and I think this is important that we go through with this because we're currently not in compliance with what the policy from the state requires, and this would bring us into that. But there's also some concerns here with, and I think Dr. Durati in the committee, we spoke of future evaluating of this policy so that we could look at, do we really want more in this area required than, say, in sciences and other areas that should also possibly be emphasized, because we're looking at 20 more units required for this area than, say, the state requires.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll bring that back to the Graduates Requirement Committee to evaluate.
And just to be clear, there is a request to bring forward a policy to change all the terminology to credits, correct?
That would be
Yes.
wonderful,
Okay.
yes.
All right, any additional comments or questions, Board?
May I move this to consent at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, will do.
5 more minutes. All right, so the next item we will take is, we can take the calendar, yes. So we're going to go to item E7, which was approval of traditional and year-round school calendars for the 2014-2015 school year. And I pulled that item, and the reason I pulled that item is I just wanted a background. Why are we changing the calendar?
I think the initial genesis of that started with actually a parent asking me, why do we have school that week? And so I did a little research to find out whether we had ever had that week off or
Can
whether
you
we...
clarify which week you're talking
The
about?
week, thank you very much, Mr. Herron. The week of Thanksgiving, so it'd be the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the Thanksgiving week.
And you're talking about Thanksgiving 2014, not 2013.
Right. Well, and this parent asked me, I think 2 years ago, that question. And so did a little research to determine whether or not we had ever had that full week as a non-student days, or we hadn't. And also did a little research on what was our enrollment like as far as students, and very importantly, how many teachers were present during that period of time. And it turns out that that's a week that is highly susceptible to absences at a very high rate. So in conversations with both the Teachers Association and with principals, our administrative team, and clearly the input from the parents that I've spoken to, it made sense to explore the idea of not having those 3 days as non-student days. And so we had conversations with our Teachers Association in relationship to that. They had a formal vote which approved that. And so that's why it's there before you this evening, and it is for the 2014 school year, not this next month.
Thank you. And Ms. Parker.
I just think it's important to note for parents that end up watching this, that does also mean a change in the day that school has been starting and that the day that school ends, so that in 2014, if we pass this, school will start on Wednesday, August 27th, instead of typically starting on a Monday, and will end on Wednesday, June 10th. So we will need to get the word out to parents, because between custody agreements and vacations and things like that, people do really plan ahead. So I hope that without confusing parents, because I know that there's concern that we would confuse parents about this coming Thanksgiving, that it's not this Thanksgiving, that this Thanksgiving we still just have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, but that we are making a change for next year.
Yeah, the plan would be to begin a communications plan after the
That might be a
Thanksgiving of
good idea.
2013.
Mr. Herron.
I would hope that communication plan would include our feeder schools.
Yes,
And private
absolutely.
schools. Because I know a lot of families have both, and kids in one and kids in the other. And they would like to probably coordinate their plans. And maybe the other feeder schools would look at our schedule and think that's a good idea.
They, as well as City College, have been informed that this matter is before the board this evening.
Great. Any additional comments or questions? All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the change in the traditional and the year-round school calendars for the 14-15 school year.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Parker and Dr. Foss.
May I ask the parents in the audience, how many want the whole Thanksgiving week off?
They get it.
Oh, you get it already? Oh, God. We'll catch up to you one of these days.
All right. All right. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion. I like how the parents voted with us, too. Motion passes 5-0. All right. And we still have 4 minutes, so I have to just remind folks we have to be exactly on the dot because it is a public hearing. So we will take the first reading of Board Policy 5131.62, tobacco.
That would be
Dr.
Mr.
Cash.
Torina.
Mr. Torina.
Madam President, esteemed board members, the current board policy 5131.62 prohibits any product containing tobacco or nicotine while on campus. Additional language to this policy will provide more specific guidance related to this issue in regard to electronic nicotine delivery systems and other vapor-emitting devices with or without nicotine content. And I believe I had Dawn Dunn, I'm not sure if she's here in the crowd, from Public Health, to actually show you some of the samples that we're talking about, the electronic cigs or the nicotine delivery systems. I don't see her present, so maybe she's thought it was going to be later.
She might have thought it was going to be later.
So part of what we're doing is trying to keep up with the current trend of tobacco industry and nicotine delivery systems. What we found is there are devices which students can have that look very much like school tools, pencils or pens, and they actually are nicotine delivery systems. They're called vaporizers or vapes, and what we've seen is a growing usage while on campus in regards to that across the nation. Part of what our objective is for doing this is to kind of be ahead of the curve so that we give our administrators in the school leverage to be able to look at those devices because currently they're not covered under our board policy.
Great, thank you. Board, any comments or questions? No, we're good. All right, so.
Is this an item I could move to consent at the next meeting?
Yes, you can move
All
this
right.
to consent. 2 minutes.
All right, 7
All
o'clock.
right. Is yours 7? Is ours 7?
It says 7.
All right, so I am going to close our general meeting for October 22nd, 2013, and open up the public hearing regarding sufficiency and insufficiency of instructional materials for traditional calendar schools. Ms. Parker, do we have any public comment on that?
No, we do not.
All right, so I will go ahead and close the public hearing and reopen our general meeting. Dr. Cash?
Mr. Torina.
Mr. Torina.
Okay. California Ed Code, Section 60119, as revised by Chapter 118, Statutes of 2005 and California Code of Regulations, CCR, Title 5, Section 9531, states that in order to be eligible to receive instructional material funds, the governing board of each district is required to hold an annual public hearing and adopt a resolution stating whether each pupil in the district has sufficient or insufficient textbooks or instructional materials in specified subjects that are aligned to the academic content standards and consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum frameworks adopted by the state board in grades K through 8 and approved by the local education agency board of education for grades 9 through 12. The specific subjects include reading language arts, intervention programs, mathematics, history, social science, science, health, foreign language, and laboratory science courses. Additionally, districts are required to verify that sufficient science laboratory equipment is available to all students enrolled in high school lab science courses. It has been determined that there are sufficient textbooks at elementary and secondary schools with the exception of K-5 students at open alternative. The title and publisher of each state Board of Education adopted and Board of Education approved textbooks for each core instructional area in use at each Santa Barbara Unified School District elementary and secondary school on traditional calendar is attached. After we got this report from the county, Assistant Superintendent Handel and I went to OAS and we looked at their materials and we found all the materials there. They were located in a classroom and we were trying to figure out what had happened, and what we figured out is that at the beginning of the school year, what was once their library and textbook room was consolidated and moved for the Quetzal program to move into that classroom. And so during that consolidation and movement, there was a little bit of loss of track of where those textbooks were. But since that time, we've made sure that each student in each classroom has each core textbook available to them in the classroom at their access.
Board questions or comments? Mr. Herron?
I'll move approval of resolutions number 2013-14-19 and 2013/14-21 regarding sufficiency in the case of number 19 and insufficiency in the case of 21 of instructional materials for traditional calendar schools.
Thank you, Mr. Herron.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Idelson. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion passes 5-0. All right, so this concludes our action agenda items. We are now moving to the planned conference agenda items, and we will begin with the staff report for the Santa Barbara Charter School Renewal Petition. Mr. Handel. And we do have public comment, so.
But I just want to say, you want to make sure people get their stuff.
Yes, thank you. So if there are any other public folks who want to participate in public comment, please get your slips in because we are going to close public comment at this time. So if there are any lingering forms out there, this is the time to get them in. So we have one more coming. All right, so we are closing public comment, and we will actually begin with public comment. Or Mr. Handel, would you like to do an introduction, and then we'll take public comment, and then the board will comment.
Certainly. So tonight before us, we want to discuss the staff report and the recommendation for the Santa Barbara Charter School renewal, specifically the options that we want the board to discuss in relation to the petition. We have some options for board members to discuss, but we also want to talk about the findings that we had with our process in the process of trying to renew the charter. And what I want to make real clear tonight, not just to you, but to everyone out there, is that this is a legal requirement that we're obligated to put every single petition through. It's not something that we take lightly. A charter school under our jurisdiction that we govern over, we have to make sure it meets the legal requirements. So before you tonight, you have a report that I believe fulfills the word of the law and also the spirit of its intent.
Thank you, Mr. Handel. So we'll take public comment. And just so everybody knows, we will allow you 3 minutes. There's a little clock on the podium, and at the 30-second mark, we will let you know there's 30 seconds, and we will need to cut you off at 3 minutes. So please be aware of the time.
And we have 9 or 10 speakers, and I'm going to call 3 names in a row just so you have a heads up that your name is coming up soon. And we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with Nino Gentry, followed by Germán Garcés Gómez, and then Claudia Lopez Hammers.
Greetings, everyone. I know we'll probably have a lot of formal speeches tonight. A lot of people who will come in here and talk about a lot of their personal experiences. What brought me here tonight was diversity. And I know that that's one of the calls that we're having to be speaking about is diversity. And I noticed that we have it here on our mission statement for us to talk about what is diversity. And that's the question that kind of, rang to me. As we look in the crowd, we see a lot of different faces. We see a lot of different faces up here on the board as well. And we want to be also to have our children to experience that same form of diversity. I think that Santa Barbara Charter School is representative of the community, and we strive to grow and to have that to be an achievement for our students and for our children. The other aspect of diversity is not just in our physical appearance, but also in our ideas, in our ideology, and in our capacity for thought and how we interpret things. Santa Barbara Charter embodies that diversity in their difference in thought. I don't necessarily agree with all the parents. I don't necessarily follow the same sort of lifestyle that everybody and that all the parents follow. But we have a school that fosters and endears us to the diversity and to having different types of students. Santa Barbara Charter isn't a school that expels kids. Santa Barbara Charter is a school that keeps children and works with them in a method of conflict resolution. And again, we don't always agree, but there's always a chance and a forum for us to discuss. I was impressed by the amount of formality here. It's a big divergence from what we would see at Santa Barbara Charter School. Santa Barbara Charter fosters independent learning and independent thinking, and something that I'm very grateful for my daughter to have that. My daughter's in the 3rd grade.
30 seconds.
Oh, wow, that went by quick.
It does.
Daughter's in the 3rd grade, and she started when she was in kindergarten. And I'm glad that she had this experience to start off her school curriculum. And I ask that we continue to have Santa Barbara Charter School be a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Germán Garces Gomez, followed by Claudia Lopez Hammers, followed by Aura Carpizo.
Hello. When I heard that our neighborhood school, the kindergarten class, anyway, let me fix my train of thought. So I heard that in my district school, kids get yelled at. So like in the kindergarten class, someone like this little girl told the substitute teacher to yell, to scream, because the kids wouldn't listen to anything else. I was like terrified. I was like, oh no, I can't take my kid there. Like I don't want him to be yelled at. So when I went to Charter, I saw these kids make like noisy with so much energy, and all this community that they I don't know, it felt really close. So I said we went to the tour, and I told my wife, yeah, let's do it. And she's like, well, we have to win the lottery. I'm like, what? A lottery? How come? And she's like, yeah, we have to wait till April. And I'm like, oh shoot. So we waited, and luckily we won. And I was like, awesome, it's so awesome. It felt like, really, honestly, it felt like winning the super lotto, the lotto. I forget, like winning $400 million. That's how we felt. And but it's an irony, because we live by City College. So it was like a lottery to drive 40 miles a day and to volunteer at this school. So it was like the opposite of winning something. But in our hearts, we felt like we belong there. And we still do. It's been only 3 months, because my kid is in kindergarten. And there's nothing like knowing that my kid is like, he's bilingual, and thanks to Sonia, who's an amazing teacher. You should see her when she's at school. She's so amazing, and I'm thrilled. I'm super happy about that we belong to this community of people who, the parents are like unlike any other parents, honestly. And this is just, again, a sample of 3 months that we have been there. And again, we are, we both come from Colombia, my wife and I, and we are super, super happy, super, super thrilled that
30 seconds.
That we are at charter. So it's really sad to me that, we just got into charter and now they're shutting it down. It really feels like, oh no, this is wrong. Like this shouldn't be happening, because the school is so incredible. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I have all these things, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Claudia Lopez Hammers, followed by Aura Carpizo, followed by Blanca Rosa Avila.
Good evening, and thank you all for your time and opportunity to hear SBCS parents once again share why Santa Barbara Charter School should be renewed. My name is Claudia Lopez Hammers, and I chose SBCS for my 2 children, one in 3rd grade now and in second grade, for 3 reasons. One, I wanted each one to be personally challenged in their academic learning style. 2, I wanted each one to be a part of a community that respects and recognizes the gifts and talents that each classmate offers. 3, I wanted each one to grow and continue their love and passion for learning. I feel that SBCS is a place that my children are achieving these 3 goals. Now, a little of my background is that I was born in Mexico and arrived in the States as a child. I went through the English immersion program, and because of 2 key teachers that encouraged me to pursue higher education, I went on to receive my credentials and my Master's of Education. I taught in the public school system for 6 years and then homeschooled my own children for another 3 to 4 years. When it was time for my child to attend kindergarten, I visited SBCS and absolutely loved it. It lined up with my methodology of teaching and learning. We were put in their lottery system and had no choice but to wait. While I waited to hear from SBCS, I attended our local elementary neighborhood school for observations and orientation. I left the orientation feeling uneasy about my child attending the school. And the only word I can use, to describe those feelings is institution. Now, institution, by its definition, is not a bad word, but it felt bad when it came to my child's future and learning. We were notified soon after that my child could attend SBCS, and we were very thrilled. We have felt grateful and blessed to be a part of our school's community. We support its charter 100%. I feel strongly that our children will be lifelong learners with Santa Barbara Charter School as their foundation in education. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Aura Carpizo, followed by Blanca Rosa Avila, followed by Jenna Hayden.
Okay. Good evening. I am Aura Carpizo, the mother of Serenity, who is in the 2nd grade at Santa Barbara Charter School. I was born in Mexico City. My first language is Spanish, as is my daughter's. My mother volunteers and gives a Spanish class in her classroom. She's been doing this for 3 years now. Yes, 3 years. Why did I choose Santa Barbara Charter School for my daughter? Well, the main reason is I wanted the best school and education for her. I have dyslexia, and I was one of those children that fell through the cracks in the educational system here in Santa Barbara. After visiting several schools, I knew that Santa Barbara Charter School was the place for my daughter. That this school would keep the excitement and joy of learning for her. The teachers see each child and embrace their families. They make sure that each one of them is learning what they need to learn. Santa Barbara Charter School is a school that teaches the whole child: academic, social skills, problem solving, communication, respect for one another, and everything around them, something that most children are lacking these days. Santa Barbara Charter helped my daughter realize that speaking another language was something to be proud of. Our school sees each child and gives them what they need to flourish as individuals. They know they are all unique and different, and that they all do not fit in the same box. Any child that goes to Santa Barbara Charter School will be given all the tools to be able to reach their full potential in life. And I quote my daughter, "It is awesome, and you learn a whole bunch of things." Thank you.
Thank you. Blanca Rosa Avila, followed by Jenna Hayden, followed by Michael Bernard.
Oh, it's kind of nervous. I mean, it makes me nervous to be up here in front of everybody, but it kind of feels like I'm at home with all of the people and all the parents from charter school. This is great to see all y'all here. My name is Blanca Rosa Avila. My children attend Santa Barbara Charter School. Antonio is in kindergarten, and Lucelena is in 3rd grade. Their father and I were both raised in Santa Barbara County. We attended kinder through 12th grade in Santa Barbara and Lompoc. We went to Santa Barbara City College, and we graduated from UCSB. We were very proud to have represented Latinos in higher education, and we felt like we were kind of overcoming a lot of obstacles and being from low-income families and the only Latinos, or the only people in our families to have been going to college. We fought a lot of obstacles on our way to our professional careers. As products of this school system, we overcame discrimination, excessive discipline, and what seemed to be an impossible ESL curriculum. As you can imagine, we were very choosy when it was time to pick a school for our children to attend. We purposely sought out a school that would see our kids as individuals, a school that would teach the importance of community and leadership, and all while nurturing a love for art and learning in general. I truly believe we found that environment here at charter school. During my daughter's kinder year, I was surprised to learn that my daughter, who hardly speaks Spanish, had been categorized as an English learner because I had proudly confirmed we speak Spanish at home in the English or home language survey. So I was really surprised and I was really upset. I spoke to my daughter's teacher about my concern, and I was really afraid that my daughter would be placed in a subpar learning track system. So she, my daughter's teacher, quickly set up a meeting between myself and staff.
30 seconds.
And I was invited to an all-staff meeting, and they addressed my concerns and my fears. The ed director and I came up with a 3-year plan, and we are happy to report that my daughter will be soon categorized as a traditional student, not an ESL student. Anyway, I'm confident that my teachers' needs, or my children's needs, are being met at Charter. I know that the curriculum will teach them what they need to think critically. The emphasis on art will foster their love for school, and their focus on restorative justice will teach them tolerance and respect, responsibility, and love for their community.
Thank you. Jenna Hayden, followed by Michael Bernard, followed by Lisa Thomason.
Santa Barbara School District Board and Staff. My name is Jenna Hayden, and I have been a full-time classroom teacher in the Santa Barbara School District and in the Goleta Union School District. And I've taught preschool through 12th grade students, and I've also been a foster mom to 3 children. I currently have 4 of my 5 children attending Home-Based Partnership of Santa Barbara Charter School. Our family's been with Santa Barbara Charter for 5 years. I have 2 points to make tonight. Last meeting, I heard talk of Santa Barbara Charter not having enough diversity based on economic and racial diversity data only. Just last week, on October 15, 2013, Philanthropy News Digest posted an article citing a study that found an achievement gap for California children in foster care based on statewide data from the 2009-2010 school year. The report found that California public school students in foster care scored lower on standardized tests than their peers, including those from low-income and at-risk backgrounds. Offhand, I can think of 21 charter family students who have been fostered through the Santa Barbara County or adopted domestically or internationally. Although we know that Santa Barbara test scores compare favorably to California as a whole, this may offer one piece of information you may not have been aware of, feeding into our similar schools ranking. My second point is that the standardized test of the past tested with great breadth and less depth. It focused more on a computational style rather than on creative problem solving. I believe the new Common Core testing will focus more on depth and creative approaches of learning, which does reflect the style and philosophy of the charter school. I imagine charter will be a leader in developing ways that reflect the creative problem-solving approach of the Common Core assessments. I want to inform you that at the 2013 Santa Barbara County Math Super Bowl, a team exclusively made of home-based partnership Santa Barbara charter students won first place in the 4th grade hands-on creative problem-solving competition. We may well see that Santa Barbara charter proves to be a model for the district in the new Common Core testing. I believe in community. Santa Barbara charter is a thriving community that has actively responded to each of this board's concerns and requests and will continue to do so, and will continue to do all that's in our power to be a beneficial member of the Santa Barbara School District as we comply with district and state standards and as we parent intelligent, connected children who deeply enjoy learning. Please renew our charter.
Thank you. Michael Bernard, followed by Lisa Thomason, followed by Ben Sutherland, I believe.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I moved here from New York City about 5 years ago with twin boys. They both entered the Kellogg School, kindergarten at Kellogg School in Goleta. We rapidly found out that while the school was great for my son Harry, it was not a good fit for my son Jackson. By the end of 1st grade, he was fighting with teachers. He had terrible trouble making friends. He was getting notes home from the principal. He refused to do his work in school. He refused to do his work at home. It was very difficult. We've looked for another school. We looked at a lot of schools. He ended up at Santa Barbara Charter. He's now entering the 4th grade. He loves the school. He runs to his classes. He does all his homework with a little bit of argument sometimes. He's 10. He does his work in school. He reads and he reads and he reads, and he has a great group of friends. He learns differently, and Santa Barbara Charter is an incredible resource for kids who don't fit in with the regular schools. I have volunteered in the Kellogg School and the Santa Barbara Charter School once a week for years, all through 2nd grade, all through 3rd grade. You cannot tell me that what they're teaching my son Harry is more than what they're teaching my son Jackson. I see what those kids do. I see what they learn. They're learning the exact same stuff, but they also let Jackson, when he argued, his teachers took concern. They let him talk about his feelings. They let him work it out with his friends. He's just a much better kid. I know that Kellogg School spends 2 days doing test prep, because I know testing is an issue. I don't really understand it, but I know it's an issue. I know that I looked at Mountain View School for Jackson. Granted, these are Goleta schools, not Santa Barbara schools. They do 2 weeks of test prep. Santa Barbara Charter doesn't do test prep. They don't teach kids to take tests. They teach kids to learn, and they teach kids to love it. It's an incredible resource for the city of Santa Barbara for kids who don't fit in, and it would be a horrible shame to lose that resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Thomason, followed by Ben Sutherland.
Hi, I'm Liza Thomason, and today I was working in my daughter's classroom, and with all the stuff going on, with our renewal in the back of my mind, I looked down at this group of kids that I was working with, a Russian girl, a Hispanic boy, an ESL Dutch boy, and a Turkish girl, and thought, diversity is not the right word. Clearly, Santa Barbara Charter School is a very diverse community in many, many ways. I also understand, especially sitting through some of these board meetings, how important it is for the board to meet legal requirements. And I understand that one way to do that is looking at the statistics, the test scores, our demographics. But what I also know is that both law and statistics are greatly subject to interpretation. I believe that you can find the answers to our Santa Barbara Charter School proving that they are meeting children's learning by coming down to the school and looking at their extensive portfolios. You will see documentation of their learning from day one all the way through 6th grade that is far more extensive than any testing could show. So we have that documentation and resource that could be used as a way to show that we are meeting the requirements. As far as the diversity issue goes, as I said, diversity is really the wrong word. The word is that we're underrepresented for Hispanic students, and Santa Barbara Charter School has expressed that they would like to help solve that problem. I believe that the district has a great role to play in that as well. As you have access to all of the families in the school district, you would be able to share with them the information about Santa Barbara Charter School's open enrollment dates. And I believe that what we're really looking at, instead of focusing on demographics and numbers, is equity and access. Clearly, people of all different backgrounds are welcome at Santa Barbara Charter School. In fact, one of my friends texted me today going, I really want to write a letter to the board about Estelle and Sabella because, they're underrepresented demographic. What should I say? And I thought, oh, yeah, of course. I didn't think about you being Hispanic because you're Estelle and Sabella. That's how our school is. It's about the people and not about the label. So I am really hoping that Santa Barbara Charter School and the Santa Barbara Unified School District can work together to show that our statistics meet your legal needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can tell me if I'm reading this right. Is it Ben Sutherland?
Yeah, you got it perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably be even briefer than some of the speakers. I want to make 2 comments and then ask a question or two. I'm from Santa Barbara, but have been living in Italy and France for many years, so we've recently come back. That's relevant for 2 reasons. Number one, my daughter's Italian. Italian is her mother tongue. It's her first language. She speaks Italian with her mom, with me sometimes. That brings diversity into the school in a way that probably didn't show up in the statistics. It also brings diversity in that she is able to communicate with other kids at the school who come from binational background with roots in Mexico or elsewhere in Latin America and roots here. And she's got a similar situation, but it's a little bit different. My mom comes from this country, Italy, and that's where I grew up. Number 2, I wanted to move back to Santa Barbara, but in order to do that, we needed to find a school that would be right for Sky. Sky's mom in particular was hesitant at a couple of the schools. Well, we visited some schools, I won't mention their names, but then we visited charter school, and it was hands down the best of what we saw. Beyond that, I want to, again, I'm new to, the way this system works. It was reading the report at 2 in the morning, and so I don't quite understand the background. There's one thing that jumped out at me, and maybe I've missed something, but I'm surprised I haven't heard anybody else mention it tonight. Reading the report, it consistently talks about what is written in the petition, whereas I was expecting it to say, this is what we've had these observers in these classrooms, and this is what they've reported. Seems to me, unless I've missed something, that what we're looking at here is probably a problem with the reporting, where information is missing or was poorly expressed in the document that was submitted. So my question is, which classrooms have been visited by your investigators? I'm only familiar, have direct experience with my classroom, but which ones have been visited?
So let me just let you know about the process. We actually can't answer questions. We can't engage in questions. So you're welcome to give public comment, but we can't engage in a conversation. Because of the Brown Act, that's the law. We have to follow, we listen to you, we don't, so.
Okay, well, for me, I guess that was pretty shocking to read that. I'm sure you guys know the answer as to what's been visited and just can't say it, but.
Thank you.
Okay.
And your time, sorry, you're down to about 10 seconds at this point.
I guess that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so this concludes public comment. Mr. Handel, do you have more, or should?
Well, we have a bit. We do have a couple of slides that we do want to share with the board to go over some of the information that was gathered. You got that, Mr. Tedeschi? It's coming. While our camera warms up. Again, I do want to clarify that this is a legal process. Well, excuse me, we do have to follow specific guidelines that are laid out in the Ed Code. And I've spent a lot of time with that big blue Ed Code book on my desk, going through all of it and looking at other similar petition renewals. So there has been a lot of time put in, not just by me, but other members of our staff into this. And again, this is not something we took lightly. So we did find 4 areas of concern. You see them up there. They are the unsound educational program, a lack of comprehensive description of the educational program, a lack of racial and ethnic balance, and the unsound financial projections. Next.
Mr. Handel, can you go
Yes.
back to that slide?
Certainly.
Just for clarification, this is not our terminology. This is the Department of Education for the State of California terminology. So we did not make up this criteria. We didn't use our own words. This is taken exactly from Ed Code.
This is taken exactly from Ed Code. You are correct. There are 16 different criteria that the charter petition and renewals all have to meet in order to be initially approved and also renewed after they've been approved the first time around. So these 4 areas are areas that we found concern in. But we do have, even with the 4 findings that we came up with, we are still recommending approval with certain conditions. They did meet the renewal criteria, and I want to remind our board that back in May, we brought forth a revision to our board policy based upon language that came forth through legislation, putting more academic focus and more emphasis in the renewal petition that had to be met 1 out of 5 criteria. You'll see up there that Santa Barbara Charter School met 2 out of the 5. But that's just a starting off point. That's just to be eligible to be renewed. But if the board so choose, they could just give a blanket renewal based upon the 2 academic criteria. As I've spoken to, the conditional renewal, again, that's a staff recommendation. And then the third one is non-renewal based simply on the 4 factual findings of the concerns that we found. Those are the choices before you. I do want to review the conditions that we would recommend with a renewal. One is the creation of a 3-year professional learning plan, creation of a 3-year Common Core state standards transition plans, and these are real important. They actually go hand in hand. With the implementation of the Common Core, our district and districts throughout the nation are adopting these new standards. And regardless of a school's personal philosophy, part of having a charter school is that you meet specific criteria as they relate to academic performance of the charter school. I recall distinctly reading how the school must provide an education that is at least on par with the other schools within the district. And that's why we compared API scores of students, and Santa Barbara Charter School with only one significant subgroup. That's why that was pointed out in the report to you. The 3-year Common Core Standards Transition Plan and the Professional Learning Plan that would accompany that transition plan, because teachers are going to need support as they transition to new standards and the shifts in pedagogy. We also want a comprehensive description of their educational plan. What I found were a lot of global in general terms, nothing specific. So if we're talking about English learners, you'll see that number 4. English learners, low achieving students, high achieving students, we need specific, a more comprehensive description of what exactly the charter school is doing to meet those specific groups' needs in terms of curriculum. I heard a mention of portfolios, something I'm familiar with. I have visited Santa Barbara Charter School on more than one occasion. I have seen the portfolios. Nothing that I saw in the petition showed me curriculum that they were using, showed me year-long plans, showed me a rubric to score portfolios or assignments. So that's a piece that would have to be worked on as well. Number 4 obviously goes with number 3, because they are much more descriptive of 3 groups we want to serve. And to add to that 4th condition, low achieving, the portion of the petition that was supposed to be speaking to low achieving students, there was some language that spoke to special ed students, nothing to the effect of what response to intervention, what type of strategies would be utilized with low achieving students, and the same for high achieving students, what type of acceleration projects or programs or philosophies or strategies we'd be using with that particular group. And English learners. With our Title III funding, the federal funding that we receive for Title III students, for English learner students, there's very specific in how we're supposed to serve our English learners. We would have to receive a lot more specificity, comprehensive language to address the English learner students and the programs that they would receive. I did notice, and when I researched the data, that there were English learner students in the school, and they did come from Italy, and they spoke different languages, ones that we don't typically see in our school. We typically see Spanish, but there was some diversity in terms of the English learners and the language that these students brought to the school. But there wasn't a specific program, and that's what we need spelled out for us. We need a real clear language of what we're doing with our students, other than the teacher monitoring the growth of students. There are specific instructional strategies that we need to use with our students as they progress in their English language development. Next slide, please. We also want to create, the charter school to create a comprehensive and sound financial projection. The business office created a projection of expenditures for the Santa Barbara Charter School, and what we saw with keeping the expenditures the same for the next couple of years is that the charter school would burn through its reserves at the end of next year, and so that they would be in the red. Perhaps this is something of just our financial office, our business office, working closer with Santa Barbara Charter School, and if that's the case, that would be great. But we need more information in regards to their financials in order to go forward. And lastly, as you've heard tonight, create a comprehensive plan to attain racial and ethnic balance. That is something, again, it's a legal requirement, and one of the 16 components that we need addressed in order to move forward. I heard the speakers. I feel their sense of urgency in this area, but realize this is also the criteria that we look at is data that we pull off our information system and the information that the state looks at. So if the state were to pull that data and just look at it on its face, they would see that the racial, ethnic balance of the Santa Barbara Charter School is not aligned to our district-wide data, which is from from Santa Barbara all the way out to Dos Pueblos, but it's much more out of line when we just look at our K through 6 system, which is 70, I think, 70-25 or 70-30 Hispanic. It's a mirror of opposite. So
No.
So what we have to do is make sure we receive a comprehensive plan from the charter school, laying out specific steps with timelines. We put targets in some of the conditions to make sure that that particular area gets addressed in a timely manner. And you'll see that the targets aren't these huge growth that we would need to see. It would be a simple 10% growth each year. And that's, I don't believe, a lot to ask for, considering where they're at right now.
Thank you, Mr. Henda. And I just want to explain to the parents and the public why the meeting is structured the way it is. We have to, by law, follow the Brown Act. And so the public comment is exactly that, a comment session. We can't go into questions and answers. Then we have the presentation. I know, because I've been on the other side, it's very frustrating, and it's not the most conducive way at times to have conversations, especially to tackle complicated and sensitive issues. And I would say that if you talk to some folks, they would probably agree that that's a limitation. However, we are abiding by the Brown Act, and in no way is it to dismiss the concerns. There are other avenues as well. Again, public comment, emails. I know I've had a hour-plus meeting with Bev, wherever you are, Bev. So there's other ways to communicate, and I understand your frustration, and this is not meant to disrespect anyone's feelings. It's just the process we have to engage in order to abide by the law, to not have conversations we're not supposed to be having, and to ensure that the board are the decision makers as opposed to the public. So I want to just clarify that. And with that, I will take comments and questions from the board, unless the superintendent has something to add. Dr. Paz.
I just want to follow up and say that we take all of the comments that we have received thus far. I know I've read every email that someone has sent me, and so we definitely have that as a means to hearing your voices and taking that in consideration. I don't want to say they start blending into each other, but it's hard to remember all of the things. But I try to get as much as I can out of them and try to understand where all of you are coming from. One comment that I want to make sure that we're clear about, but that we're reviewing a petition that was given to us, and that's the basis of which we make our decision. And the staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're responding to what's contained in that petition.
That's correct. The burden, it sounds like a legal proceeding, but the burden does fall on the petitioner.
And I just wanted to make sure that we were clear about that, because that's what we're trying to determine our decision on, is based on a petition that either is sufficient enough to move forward or insufficient. And right now we're discussing and having a discussion on the points that we feel need to be clarified, need to have more information. And I just want to make sure that people understand that point. The other point that I also wanted to make sure that people understand is that we do greatly appreciate the openness that many of you have articulated tonight about wanting to have a conversation and wanting to have an ongoing conversation with the board and staff from the district to make sure we're addressing all of our concerns, but that we're also doing it in partnership with you all.
Thank you, Dr. Paz. Ms. Parker, then Ms. Idelson.
I wanted to say thank you for all the public comment and for the emails that we've been getting, and I haven't had the opportunity, because I've been getting so many emails, that I haven't been able to respond to all of them yet. I hope to get back to all of you sometime in the next week. But what I did notice, both in public comment and in and in the emails that I was getting, sort of three themes coming forward. One was the theme of how well my own student is doing, how much my family loves Santa Barbara Charter, and I really appreciated hearing that. I do believe it's a very alternative program that fits well with certain families, and that it's very, very important to those families, and I appreciated hearing about that. What I want families to understand is that when we look at things like the test data, that when some families would say, you know, my kids are doing so great and they went on and did so well, that we're also thinking about the kids that are demonstrating that they're not doing well. And we are not sure that you know, a student that is not proficient in reading or math in third or fourth grade is ever going to turn around and make it when they're in junior high or high school. And that was one of the things that was missing from the petition, that sense of where, you know, how do we move them, because we haven't seen them being moved up to the proficiency level. And so that's a concern for us, for that large minority of students that aren't testing at grade level. The other piece was about test scores in general. Test scores don't matter. We don't want them to matter. And I understand that, and that would work completely for a private school. This is a public charter school, and in fact, what we've seen are the laws changing, and the state actually requiring more and more insistence on focusing on the test scores. And it's interesting times ahead because tests are completely changing, and I too would love to see have Santa Barbara Charter be a leader in the district in terms of how that shows up in the Common Core assessments. But when I look at other progressive schools around the state, what I see is the progressive schools are usually the test score leaders in their districts. Charter or alternative magnet schools, they're usually the test score leaders. I look at essentially our two progressive schools within the Santa Barbara district and go, wow, you know, what's going on that we are so, you know, by far the lowest in the state. And so that's something that I think as the school community you should reflect on. And the third piece that came up is the theme of diversity, and I really appreciated hearing from parents tonight. I do think that we have a tendency to mix up the terms diversity and demographics, and the law requires that you are seeking to reflect the racial and ethnic balance of the community that the school district serves. And it's not about multicultural, it's not about being diverse in other ways. And I had one parent write that saying, you know, your neighborhood schools aren't diverse, and it's true, we're not, because we are by far a dominant Latino elementary school district. But it's not about diversity, it's about reflecting the racial and ethnic demographic of the community that it serves. So that's something that we're paying attention to, and that's something with some of the emails that I started to get, it was actually starting to raise red flags for me, because I think, especially some of those of you who got up and spoke, you might be dismayed at some of the emails that we got along this lines, because I was seeing some defensiveness and closed-mindedness around it, and I really feel like if we're going to work with Santa Barbara Charter on this issue, that this is something you need to be open-minded about and something that you need to be welcoming to, and not something that you're frightened of. So that is something that I wanted to let you know. In terms of making my own decision on this, of course, I'll be listening to what my fellow board members have to say, and further, I do have hope to get some further information from staff. One question I have for you is on the evaluation piece, in terms of if we renew with conditions, and I'll come back to this because there's one other thing I want to say. But if we renew with conditions and then we feel like they don't meet a condition, what happens? So that's a question I have for Dr. Cash or Mr. Hendel. But one thing I want to say is that if this were a brand new charter coming to me that had a track record where its academics were not as high as the district's schools, and it had a track record where it showed that it didn't have experience making being successful in drawing from the racial and ethnic demographic of the community that it serves, and it didn't have, you know, a dramatically different program. You guys do have, I really think, a dramatically different program. That I would not grant that new petition. I would never vote to grant the new petition. I do really respect the 20-year history that Santa Barbara Charter has in this community, and I do really respect how much you love your school and where I feel like your heart is and what maybe you're willing to work towards. And so for me, I am most curious about the idea of renewing with conditions, and that's my question. So what happens if they don't meet the conditions?
And so,
We'll certainly get an answer to that question.
Okay. Ms. Idelson?
This is my first experience with a charter renewal, so I'm listening very openly to how this all works. And I definitely feel for the parent community. I can see your passion in keeping your school alive and the children it serves, and I know how sensitive that all is. I have a couple questions regarding what was mentioned about the foster children. How is that taken into any account as far as how the community of foster children the charter school serves relative to, say, our traditional schools?
We'll certainly get an answer to that to you as well.
Okay, and then given that this is the 20th year that Santa Barbara Charter has been in existence, I would believe that this charter renewal happens about every 5 years.
Yes.
And my curiosity would be, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, were these issues similar, and have they changed over time, or are we continually beating a horse? I would be curious. I mean, I know there could be, initiative to, meet some of these conditions, but if we've asked for this 5 years ago and really not much has happened, what can we do differently to promote this so that it does happen and we work together as a team to see that through? So thank you, and I very much enjoyed the communication from the parents at the school and the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Idelson. I have Ms. Parker, then Mr. Herron.
And I'm just going to respond to Ms. Idelson on that, just because I served on the board in 2008, although I was not present for the charter school renewal. And that was a 3-1 vote. It was actually on our consent agenda, and it was pulled by Dr. Noel at the time, who raised some of the issues that we're talking about tonight. And the law, one of the things that I see is that the law has changed and developed over time. And so we are in a different place in terms of charter petition renewal than we were 5 years ago. For example, Cesar Chavez had they had the one thing that they could qualify on, and unfortunately that one thing they didn't qualify on. And now it's just like there's pros and cons, but essentially there's way more ways for a charter school to get into trouble in the renewal process than there used to be. And so that piece, in terms of the racial and ethnic demographic, that has been a very long-term problem.
Mr. Herron?
Well, first, the good news is that with Cesar Chavez, they had 54 conditions to meet. This is only 6. I mean, we're ahead of the game before we even start. So that's the good news. And if any of you were around in 2010 when that process, believe me, this is heaven compared. But they were the nicest audience in the world. I mean, they really were really good, concerned parents, much like you are. And, part of the public hearing last week and this week was to get the feel of the level of support by teachers, staff, and the community. And between the attendance tonight, the attendance 2 weeks ago, the 30 or 40 emails, there's absolutely no question that we have support from the community. For the record, I did get one negative email, so I want that on record, that to recognize that someone is not happy, or put it this way, is very supportive of exactly what is recommended by the staff. But I'm sorry also that somehow the impression is out there that the board leans towards not renewing. Now, I only can speak for myself, but that's the farthest thing from my mind. And so if there's any hysteria out there about not renewing, it's not coming from me, because I don't believe that. And I don't know how my fellow board members feel, but 20 years of experience is to me, very worthy. But I do have a couple questions, and I think one, the same as Mr. Parker. I'm very concerned about this May 1st date, if in fact it has a bearing on whether or not there is approval. Learning from the Cesar Chavez, we gave them until June 1st. And by June 1st, all of the deadlines for choosing a school have passed. Teachers, for fearful of their job, go someplace else. They lost 30, 40, 50 kids or families in that in-between unknown state, and they lost a couple good teachers in that state. I don't want to put this school in a situation that, you know, our deadline for admissions is February 15th, thereabouts. And so if we make you wait until May 1st to know whether you have a school or not, a lot of you may make other options, other decisions, and I would too if I was a parent. And if I was a teacher and I got another job, and not knowing if I had one in 2014 school year, I'd make another decision. I don't want anything that we do as a board to put those kind of fences in front of you or obstacles. And so I want to know, I will not vote for anything where May 1st is a hard, fast deadline that it has to come back to us for our approval. What I missed tonight was the staff has recommended renewal with 6 conditions. I've heard nobody talk about those 6 conditions. Are they reasonable? Can they be met? Can they be met in a faster time frame? I'd like to know if there's anybody in the audience who can speak to those 6 conditions, because if you stand up and say, hey, we can't meet those 6, they're impossible, they're unreasonable, that our school won't go for them, I'd like to know that. If the school says, hey, it's a piece of cake, we can do all those things, and we can do it in a 3-week time frame or a 5-week time frame or something like that, I'd like to know it.
And we'll bring you up after, I think, comment. Yeah.
The other comment I would make then is on the condition number 6, the racial and ethnic balance. Unfortunately, we put the school in a difficult situation because you can't take children based upon their race or ethnicity. And you all acknowledge that there's a lottery. So you could have all of the ethnic, or all the Latinos in the world apply, but it's a pure gamble whether they get in or not. And so to put the school in the situation that we demand that you get more Latinos or Hispanics, puts a burden on you. You know, as I understood it from 2 weeks ago, the number of new students you take in any one year is very small in the grades other than kindergarten. So if we demand this 10% a year, it almost has to be in kindergarten. It almost like you have to load your kindergarten, but it's by lottery, and so there's no guarantee. So again, I don't know how, I mean, if this is a plan or if this is, I can see where we need a plan. In fact, I think we got one handed to us last week. Maybe it was a format of a plan of action. But if number 6 is purely give us a 5-year plan showing what you're going to do and how you're going to attempt to do it, I think that's easy. But if we're saying, hey, well, I don't think we can say by 2018-19 it's got to be 27.92%. If that's a goal, aspiration, fine, I have no problem with it. But I'd be hard-pressed to put those things and make the impression that they're in concrete. If you do it, I hope we get 100% commitment you'll do it. But I don't know that I want to put that in concrete, that if you don't, 5 years from now, you come before us and we're going to say, sorry, you didn't make it. No, I won't be here in 5 years. I think those are my main comments. Oh, I know one other thing. I noticed in the petition that your deadline for admissions, I think, is February 15th. We worked with Peabody so that their deadline, because our deadline is April 15th. So what happened is you have your lottery, people don't get in, but it's too late to come to us because we're full. And so then they have to take second choice, what's left available. I'd like to see you in your petition move your deadline to February 1st, or look at Peabody's. They do their lottery February 1st or thereabouts, right after February 1st, so that the parents who don't get in can then come and register at the school of their choice in our district and maybe get in by a lottery if it's not their home school. So I'd like you to look at that section of your renewal and change those dates and change your process a little bit so that your families don't get hurt waiting until after February 15th, find out they didn't get in, and then have no place with us.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. So I actually want to clarify some things because there's themes that I've been hearing in emails and in person. I think first and foremost, it needs to be told that legally, charter schools are public schools. I don't know where the misconception is that charter schools have nothing to do with public schools. Unfortunately, I got several emails with the tone about how horrible the public school system is. And I just want to remind you, you as a charter school, you're part of the public school system. And I think that we need to be aware that as a public school with public funding, there are public requirements that the state of California requires. And so I understand people's, I think, enthusiasm for choice, but choice also happens in the public school system, and that doesn't negate our responsibility to follow state education code. So I think that that's one of the things I wanted to make very clear. I also want everybody to be aware that we hold every charter school to the same standard. I was a charter school board member, and I can tell you that this was this is an easier process, as Mr. Herron said, as being a charter school board member for Adelante, formerly Cesar Chavez. But it's not just the charter schools we hold to this level. We hold ourselves to this level. If anybody has followed any of our meetings and watched our conversations, listened to our conversations about our academies, about our special programs, about our athletics, you would know that every single program that comes forward is held to a high standard. This is not anything different. This is not specifically targeting one particular school. The 16 criteria that the state outlines are not a mystery. They're public. They've been there. So for me, I'm confused as why this is a surprise. That has been in place. We knew what we were going into ahead of time. We knew what the criteria is. The state of California says it very clearly. So for me, this isn't, and I said this last meeting and I repeat it, it's not about I gotcha. There are 6 areas that need work. And I think I'm a little concerned because I don't understand why that's a bad thing. To say that we want a plan for fiscal solvency, to say that we want a plan for the curriculum that's going to be taught, to say that we want a plan to know how our teachers at every school are going to get the support that they need, the professional learning, to say that we want a plan that you get to write. As a charter school community, you get to tell us what your plan is going to be about how you know that you've reached the goals you've set. I don't understand why that is a bad thing. I actually see that as a good thing. I think that that's something I want from all of our schools. And the neat thing about this is that you get to set the direction. We ask you, what's your direction, and you get to tell us. And I think that those 6 bullet points are essentially saying, we don't know, based on the charter that's been submitted. We did not write the charter. The charter was written by the Santa Barbara Charter School community. And so I think it goes to Dr. Paz's point that we're working with the information that we've received from the Santa Barbara Charter School community. Visits have been made, but this is, I mean, folks, when you're talking about school district in the state of California, I wish to tell you that everything we see or we hear about is what's going to be documented, but we need things in writing. So if the charter petition, as I think Mr. Sutherland said, if there's a problem with reporting if there may be a problem with reporting that something hasn't been reported accurately, I would say, right, but we have to actually share the responsibility. What this process is the district identifying, here are the 6 areas where we just didn't have enough information. And I actually am fine with requiring that the charter school brings forward plans in these areas. And I want to touch on the piece about the demographics. I know some folks really want us to look at demographics of the city of Goleta or the city of Santa Barbara and not the school district demographics. That is not an option. The state of California is very clear that you look and you compare to the school district demographics. And so I think the reason the state of California did this is because they didn't want segregated schools. And I have to be honest with you, I support that. It's a little troubling to me that when you look at the number of students that would potentially be increased, it goes anywhere from 2 to 8 students a year. I'm not clear on why having 2 or 8 more Latino students in a school is so upsetting to families. And not all families. Actually, as Ms. Parker stated, we received emails that said otherwise. So see, it is hard because, so we received emails that said the otherwise. So this is what's hard for me, that I feel I had great conversation, we had great dialogue. Bev and I met for over an hour last week, and we were honest about how do you work on this issue. It's a complicated issue. On the one hand, the state of California is saying you have to represent the demographic of the school districts. On the other hand, you have a lottery system. We had this conversation. But I now am wondering, well, if they're in the minority, we're hearing from them. I'm not the only one that heard from them. I can pull and quote comments that were made where it was clearly troubling, and that is of concern to me. So I think that when we're looking at this, there are creative ways. The entire University of California system has task force in team to deal with the fact that they cannot make admissions to the University of California based on race, but are by law supposed to reflect the community of the state of California. And there are other ways to increase the representation. If this is a long-standing problem, I think it's a long-standing problem that needs to be addressed. It can't be ignored. And I have to say, I don't know that I would approve it if the diversity plan doesn't address this issue. How do you become reflective of a district that you're a part of? I don't see that as a deficit model. I see this as a positive thing. So I think that I think everyone should know that we're getting different messages, so that perhaps the messages that we heard today are not necessarily the messages we're all getting in email. I think that that's part of it. I also feel that the 6 criteria that is being asked to revisit and the plans, I think, are fair. It gives, again, we're asking for direction, but you set the direction. I don't think that that's unfair, and I definitely feel like this is something that we hold ourselves to this standard. You should see what our board evaluations are like when we have to evaluate how well we're doing or how well we're not doing. We hold everybody in this district to this standard in our schools. And at the end of the day, what's most important to me is what's best for the students. And I will stand by that, and I will stick to that. And I definitely feel that creating plans in these areas, it's not a bad thing. You create a plan for fiscal solvency, for curriculum, for professional learning, for your own measurements of student outcomes. It's okay. These are not bad things. So I am not clear, actually, on where I'm at as far as the 3 recommendations. I feel like I need more information. I don't have enough information right now to even speculate. I know I've had great conversations with some individuals, and I've also had reasons for concern. So I look forward to whatever written documentation comes forward. And I did have a lot of emails over the last 24 hours that I have not been able to get back to because there were a lot. So that's where I stand. Dr. Bass?
One of the things that hasn't really, I think people are really focusing on the numbers part. And one thing that, if you were here, fortunate enough to be here at the last meeting, we were not strictly talking about numbers. It is obviously in the report, and if we're looking at a range, and that's, we get to a point in time where we're talking about a range or a soft number, whatever that may be, and we're all in agreement that that's the direction we want to go, I think that's a reasonable sort of place we want to be. But let's not talk about numbers. Let's talk about the second area that's related to achieving a balance in Santa Barbara Charter School, which is an outreach plan. How are you outreaching to the community? One thing I said at the last board meeting was that if the school, by the many comments that we heard tonight, is a really great school, then there shouldn't be a problem outreaching to the community. And that's really the focus that we are trying to impart to you, that we maybe perhaps haven't been as clear, but really it's that outreach you need to do to a wider community beyond the school walls. It's great that each of you feels a part of a community, but you are living within a community, and that's what we're trying to reach out to, is a wider part of the community who should also have that same equal benefit that each of you is now received. And that's really, in many ways, what we're trying to talk about this evening, and try to reach that happy medium, that everyone's going to have that joy that each of you presented, that spoke tonight. That's what we're talking about.
All right.
Well, Ed asked, Mr. Herron asked a question. We didn't get a chance to hear from either Mr. Wiseman or Ms. Abrams. I think it would be good to hear from them, if they want to tell us how they feel about the conditions that are in our staff report and whether they're doable or not.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having us here and allowing us to speak. I want to preface the conversation by saying that I've been through all of Santa Barbara Charter Schools renewal because I was part of the founding group. And I hope that you can understand our a little bit of confusion, only because if you've been here for other renewal processes, you know that this renewal process has been different. Many of the items that you've addressed, it was hard to listen to because we were in full agreement. We were listening to what you said and said, yes, yes, we agree with that. And if we had had a chance to negotiate and to collaborate on the establishment of these conditions, we think we could have reached common language that would have alleviated some of our concerns. Instead, we asked to meet after our last meeting in the development of the staff recommendations, so that things that we were willing to do to accommodate board concerns could possibly be incorporated into that. But that wasn't the direction that we went in this particular instance, and instead we were asked to wait until the recommendations came out in the announced to the agenda on Friday. When we got that those recommendations, it isn't that we are unafraid to make changes. It isn't that we're afraid or reticent in any way to enact a plan. It's that we genuinely looked at these recommendations and felt sincere threat to our school by the recommendations themselves. We have the same question that many board people have asked. If a condition is set and then the condition is not met, let's take Mr. Herron's example, which I just wanted to say thank you for that example, because it's the same concern that we had. If we're unable to meet one of the conditions, what does that set up for us? Immediate revocation? That's the assumption that we make, which means the end of our school. We hope that you can understand that facing that kind of situation is akin to walking into a discussion where the person with whom you're discussing is holding an axe over your neck. And if there has been fear and reactiveness in our parents' comments to you, we ask that you bear with us on that, because they're reacting from fear as well. They're afraid that the school that they've come to enjoy and desire for their kids is not going to be available to them anymore. And I can understand that fear. When we read the staff recommendations and the staff report claiming that an education plan that we'd had for 20 years was educationally unsound, we disagreed with that premise and we disagreed with that conclusion. And although we're very willing to work with, negotiate, and make changes and modifications and rewrite elements of our charter and so forth, that isn't the option that we're being given. We're given the option of meet these conditions or you can be revoked. And so that motivated us to protect ourselves legally. So I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Jennifer McQuarrie, who is Santa Barbara Charter School's attorney, to make sure that we stay on the common ground that you've all mentioned and that we certainly want to be with. We simply want to make sure that everything that is happening is legal, that it's appropriate, that it's the appropriate way for statistics to be used, the appropriate way to write these recommendations in concert with charter renewal, and we think that Ms. McQuarrie can address that for you. So I'd like to introduce her now. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for letting the charter school have a voice tonight. I do want to emphasize that the charter school wants to work with the district, that this is not a standoff. This is, let's come to some common ground. Renewal is in the best interest of everybody in this room. I do have a couple of concerns with the staff report that I just want to share with you. In the 10 years I've been working with charter schools, never have I had a charter school client of mine or client of any other attorney I know be questioned on the educational soundness of their petition for renewal when they have an API over 800. 800 is the state goal. So that is an anomaly. That's something I've never seen before. And like I say, I've been doing this for 10 years. So just an initial point of concern of mine. Another thing I noticed in the staff report is that it focused really on the renewal standards, those thresholds. There's 4 thresholds you're required to meet in order to be even eligible for renewal. You only have to meet one of those. And this school met at least 2 and arguably more. But instead of just allowing that be the threshold for the renewal consideration, which then is supposed to focus on the charter and whether it does meet the 16 elements of the Charter Schools Act in 47605, the staff report really focused on the API scores vis-a-vis schools within the district. Well, that happens to be one of the standards that is the threshold for renewal. That's not necessarily the standard for the determination whether the petition is sound. So the focus on the API is not necessarily something that is supported by the standards for renewal. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily something that you wouldn't consider, because obviously the education of the students, the academic achievement, is now the most important goal or the most important focus with respect to renewal. That has come into law as of last year. But I don't believe that the staff report takes into consideration the uniqueness of this program and the fact that the school has reached and has actually gained, I believe, somewhere along the lines of 50 points on the API over the last 2 years. Usually when you see a school getting questioned for educational soundness, their scores are going down. This school, their scores have been going up. It hasn't really, I think that also the focus on the API doesn't take into account that the API is now no longer going to be used as a standard for testing educational achievement within the state of California. It's now on a 2-year hiatus and is getting replaced completely. So there's been no recognition within the staff report about this school's uniqueness and their increase in API and all of the other educational soundness that I think is evident within their model. With respect to the racial outreach, there has been a lot of discussion. There were a couple of board members who really did focus on the issue. The Charter Schools Act requires the petition to articulate ways that the outreach is intended to get the racial makeup of the district. You can't guarantee any number. If I read a petition that had a particular number in it, I would think that the Office of Civil Rights would have a problem with that, because there is no way you can guarantee admission based upon racial makeup. So I think that there's some really important things that when you're coming up with these conditions that you really recognize that you can't necessarily guarantee an outcome. You can guarantee a process, and I think this school is more than happy to come up with a process that's mutually acceptable for both you and them. But these quotas, I think, are facially discriminatory and would definitely not pass the smell test in terms of a discrimination complaint. So if you require some of these things to happen, the prima facie case on the discrimination complaint is going to be the petition, because it's going to outline a quota. And that is just an unacceptable requirement for a charter school. I definitely agree the plan has to be the goal to increase that racial makeup of the district, but the quota system is not something that I think is legally tenable. I think that it's important to, there was a comment that the school's petition doesn't reflect the Title III English learner requirements. So this school doesn't actually receive Title III. And so they're not under the same standards as the district. I'm not saying that the charter shouldn't have, a great description of how they're going to deal with English learners, but the standards that you're placing upon the school don't necessarily apply. So I think it's really important that the standards that are being imposed reflect the actual requirements of the Charter Schools Act. In addition, one of the comments was, professional learning plan, a 3-year professional learning plan. There's nothing in the 16 elements of the Charter Schools Act that requires a description of professional development. Now, it certainly is a great idea, but to condition renewal upon a element that actually isn't articulated in the Act seems a little unfair. Just looking at my notes. I think that's it for my comments, but as I said, this school really wants to work with the district and would love to, between now and your vote, come up with some agreed upon language so that there are no conditions for the renewal, and instead that there's an understanding just moving forward and renewal can be granted at the date of the decision. So thank you.
So my comments are going to be a little less ordered than I like. I don't like to speak off the cuff at all, but the conversation tonight has taken a slightly different turn than I even anticipated a few hours ago. Can you hear me? Okay.
Could you come closer?
Sure. The first thing I want to do is address the one condition that, to me, I think it's a condition we have on ourselves. That's to approach the district demography much more accurately. Yes, we do have diversity, and I swear I love our family so much. I just was choked up from the beginning they began talking. I think we've reached a lot of families who are of Latino descent in a way that's very profound. However, for me, the issue is I want more children to have access to that opportunity to benefit from what we offer at Santa Barbara Charter School. On the way here, I was thinking about a little girl. I'll call her Gabriella. She'd been at a Santa Barbara school. She came to us in first grade because her mom was so concerned about her. The teacher didn't like her behavior. He was constantly criticizing her. She wasn't performing well. The first time she got a compliment from her teacher, she froze. And the teacher repeated the compliment, and she whispered, "Thank you." Well, by the time fall conferences came, her mom, we told her how well she was doing, and thank you for making the drive from downtown, even though you work nights. Thanks for putting her in our school. And we think she should start thinking about going to college. She was in first grade at the time. Her mom we said, maybe you want to take her out to UCSB one day. And her mom celebrated by taking her out to UCSB after the conference. She already sees herself as a student who will be going to college someday. We have lots of stories like that, and I'd like more children in this community to benefit from that. We are not a one-size-fits-all school, but you know what? There's a lot of children in this community who aren't being served by the particular kind of education that's offered. Not every child fits at Santa Barbara Charter School, but there's lots of options here. I think one of the things I was most proud about when I became a part of the charter school, which was in 1993, I was proud that this school district embraced choice and alternatives. There were a number of different kinds of programs, some really opposite to my belief system, and some matching ours, some very conservative, some very liberal. It didn't matter because there were families who needed to access them all. I'm hoping that this board will see fit to keep that spirit that was part of the school district over the last 20 years, a commitment to choice and options, and the recognition that children are really very different from each other. So are families. I want to address a few of the questions I heard. What has to do with professional development? My friends who are teachers in other schools, most of them don't have a deep sense of job satisfaction. A lot of them feel the conflict and the attention with this institution of education at this point. Our teachers love work. We love to study. We put in our in-service time for free because we like to learn. We were PLC long before the term PLC was coined. Starting 20 years ago, we studied together, and we continue to study together. So learning as a part of a professional community is part and parcel of being a teacher at Santa Barbara School. But more importantly, each year we set ourselves goals, because we see, just like the district, you mentioned how shockingly harsh you are on yourselves. We too look at ourselves with a fine tooth. Well, that's not a very good metaphor. We look at ourselves carefully. And when we do that, we say, okay, this is the area we have to improve in. One year we decided to really do a massive study of science. Another year we did, this took 2 years, a study of writing through the grades and how to implement it and what were best practices. This year, after watching our very mediocre math scores for a number of years, we decided we really had to do something. And we hired the people who run the math and context workshops to work with us, and we hired Valerie Henry to do FactWise. We already have FactWise, and we already were doing math and context, but we're better at it now. And we have FactWise up and running in all of our classes. We see the excitement of our students, and of course that's fulfilling to us. We would never need the district to tell us you have to commit to a professional development plan. That's obvious to us. Would we agree to create a professional development plan? A one-year professional development plan, yes. But you know what? I don't want last year's best workshop because I planned it 3 years before. And I don't want a workshop that addresses last year's needs when we have new needs in a given year. So I would always hope that our professional development would be more current and on target for the moment. That doesn't mean we know we have to study math for more than 1 year. We knew we had to study science for more than 1 year. So that doesn't mean you start and stop everything, but you do want to be more responsive. And that's one of the beauties of Santa Barbara Charter School. The other thing we did, and I just want to mention some of the other staff development we have going on. We've had 4 sessions of pedagogy instruction, just different techniques for improving your effectiveness in the classroom. We have somebody coming to us on the multiple intelligences. We have somebody who's going to talk to us about resilience, and someone who's going to talk to us about self-regulation. We cover the gamut of what we need to learn. When we have why are we having somebody on self-regulation? Well, we've got some tough kids this year, and we want to know how to respond to their needs. I want to segue into math a little bit. We didn't just get additional training in math because it's important. We decided we had to really do a lot. So our classes have each added a half hour of math per day for our students. Obviously, more time on task makes a difference, and we're already seeing the results in their competence. And finally, I want to address the CCSS. I don't know that there's ever been a state regulation that was easier to implement than the CCSS. It is such a much easier fit for us than the standards. The standards we always had, the California state standards, we were always wiggling and trying to make them fit. We don't have to wiggle with the core curriculum. It talks about teaching in a way that we believe in teaching. We don't know what the smarter balance, and we did start actually in-servicing in 2011, and I do expect that we're going to face some challenges, even though it's the way we teach. When you get to testing, it's going to look a little different. And so I'm sure we're going to need to continue to hire people to do training for us in how to best present core curriculum. But right now, I don't think the word is in about who's the best choice for doing that training. So far, we've had a few people, but I think there's going to be better people who are more expert coming up in the near future. The Smarter Balance test, well, the big question with the Smarter Balance test is, what is the Smarter Balance test really going to be? I've looked at the sample questions. Our staff will be studying Smarter Balance tomorrow and exploring the website together, but we don't really know exactly what it's like. However, we have made our first purchase. It's a big deal for us. We have a small budget, but we purchased our first 30 iPads. We're waiting for them to arrive. It was pretty funny when I was walking Dr. Cash through the school. I happened to say, well, we've bought our first 30 iPads. And right after, as he's leaving, a little boy came running up to me. He's a rather indifferent student usually. He said, Bev, are we really getting iPads? And I said, yeah, we really are getting iPads. He said, when do we get to take the test? For all these reasons, I guess there's one other thing I'd like to say. I'm not a last-minute person. Everybody knows that if whatever job there is, I usually finish it a month ahead because it makes me really nervous to do things on a deadline. So more than a year ago, we approached Dr. Cash and said, so what's the process for a charter renewal? I said, well, write your petition, send it to, he doesn't know who we were going to send it to. So I wrote the petition. It was done 6 months early. And then Dr. Hundell came, which was great, and we sent it off to him. What's the process? Well, look at Peabody's charter and compare it. So I compared, and there were a few things that were a little bit different in structure and content. So I fixed it and sent it off again. But what we had hoped to do is sit down and talk about the charter and the petition all through the process. Instead, the first we knew, I knew that there were going to be two issues. One was diversity, well, demography. I knew we were going to have demography as an issue. And I knew that our similar school scores ranking was going to be an issue. I actually wanted to know just what did our similar scores ranking mean. And so we hired an economist who specializes in educational statistics. And she looked at it. And what she said is, we have to first understand that that the actual API is very volatile, or they call it, this is a new term for me, noisy, when, and we submit this report to you, API is very noisy when you're a small school. So it's better to compare growth over time, take individual student scores and compare their growth over time. And she used California statewide. Our kids were way, way more advanced in their growth level in language arts, and they were just slightly above the usual growth rate in math. But I guess one other, so that was good news, because what we care about is, are our kids making progress? And they are making progress at a very good rate. But the one other observation I noticed in the study was Santa Barbara Charter School isn't a similar school to Santa Barbara Charter School in any given year. So our score, we don't come out as a similar school to ourselves in 2013 as we were in 2012. So you can only imagine how volatile or noisy our comparisons to our similar school scores are in any given year. I think I finally want to say something that I didn't realize. I actually didn't realize that board members are volunteers. And working in a school where I know how hard volunteers work, I just want to thank you. And I know the process can't be easy. I have a new diversity plan, or draft 2, thanks to Monique and some of our parents, and we'll keep on working on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate the comments. Mr. Herron?
Can you put the 6 conditions up on the board again? Because I thought I asked a pretty simple question. I know I want the ones that Emilio, Mr. Handel talked from.
The slideshow one.
Do you want them now?
I know that what's in the actual board memo is much more detailed under each of those items. But my basic question is, and you might want to just go 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I heard that maybe one from the attorney is not, quote, something that needs to be done. But can you comment on those 4 items? Can they be done? I mean, I heard a lot of comments in a lot of streams that you're doing some of them and you're happy to do them. But my question is, can you put them in writing to solve our dilemma?
Well, I know you would, I wish I could answer quite directly, but I can't completely. What I can say is, I wouldn't put the number 1 in the charter, but I'd be happy to submit it on an annual basis on behalf of the school. I think there's some issues with creating a 3-year Common Core Standards transitional plan, but to have a brief one that's similar to the one in the Peabody Charter would certainly be acceptable. I have to say, well, no, answer your question more. Comprehensive description of their educational program. You know, it's been comprehensive enough to get us through 20 years. It's at least as detailed as the Peabody Charter, which was approved, as far as I can tell from the minutes and from the staff reports that were submitted, was approved without this kind of, this scrutiny, the same level. I could be wrong, I wasn't there. But it doesn't, it's quite parallel, and it's hard to understand why there's such a difference in response to it. So I would say it would be hard to elaborate much more. There's elements. We could add attachments that I don't think would be really exactly a part of the main body, but perhaps examples of scope and sequence, examples of lessons, but not for a whole curriculum. And I have to say, I don't have in our school we do everything by consensus. So I don't even actually, that's my first glance response, but I'd have to have everybody in this room agree with me. So I'm not sure we're there yet. Create, that one would be really easy. We did it in our LEA application, the number 4, and it would be very easy because we pretty much would copy the text. Because for us, there's no difference between special ed and low achieving students. You just work with all students where they're at, and that's the same thing with high achieving students. We use the gifted model in our classes all the time for all students, because you don't have to be specifically gifted in a IQ sense, testing sense, to be able to benefit from the strategies. So that would be easy to articulate. And English learners, the same. We know what we do. But I wouldn't want to be asked or held to a standard that's other than what Peabody was held to.
Yeah, well, you know, you're going to have to answer these 6 points some way, shape, or form. And I would not definitely just copy what Peabody does. I'd put down what you do.
I didn't copy what
No.
but I compared the...
But I would put down what you do. But go ahead.
That's good.
5 and 6.
I hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. Dave will speak to number 5, and
you've spoken
and
to
I've
6.
spoken, and we will do our best to get there.
Item number 5 sort of relates to my initial comments with you. We have create a comprehensive and sound financial projection, which seems eminently reasonable, and we're very willing to provide. Here's the issue. In the past, when we've had renewals, And throughout our 20 years of history, we've had really constant discussions with the board, certainly if there was ever any financial concern. I need to tell you that having been to a budget meeting last night, that financially Santa Barbara Charter School is in the strongest condition that it has been in since 2008 and maybe beyond that. We are generating a surplus in our current budget right now. The projection that we will create as a result or in response to item number 5 is extraordinarily optimistic. The problem that I have is that when we read this item on the agenda on Friday night, we had never, ever had a conversation with any of the financial team or any staff at the district. And this is unusual for us because certainly if the district has ever had a concern about our finances, we were the first to hear. You mentioned that you didn't want it to be a gotcha moment. When we read that, it felt like a gotcha moment. I'm sorry to tell you that because our desire here is to be collaborative and to work together. And we would have meetings with the district financial people instantly, should they be called and should they express a financial concern to us. We believe that we can answer those financial concerns. Our financial health is extraordinarily good right now, which is why this item, which is not just an item requesting us to do a budget projection, but which is a precondition of renewal that we've never heard about, that we didn't even know was on the radar. And to us, it symbolizes the difference in the way that this renewal process has gone with all other renewal processes that we've been a part of. We think that that kind of discussion would yield information for the district that showed that this was not a concern. We also think that the staff report that requires, or the staff recommendation that requires this 3-year projection by November 1st, which is 7 working days from now, I guess what I would do is put that question back on the district. If you did not have that report and you needed to generate it, would 7 working days be enough? If the answer is no, then what we would ask is for consideration that we get a little more time to develop that. Now, if we'd had a chance to discuss and to talk about the recommendations beforehand, I may be very idealistic, but it's my belief that we could reach common ground and we could provide everything that the district requested and that you'd be satisfied with the information that you got.
I have no doubts whatsoever you can.
Yeah.
You know, so just stop where you're ahead. But I recall we had our unaudited actuals, and we got to the topic of Santa Barbara Charter, it showed a negative. So that's where we're coming from, is the document we had before us had a negative, $96,000 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
But, so if that's easy to do, that's what I'm asking. Is that easy to do? If it is?
Yeah. I think in terms of what we would request is some more time. We think we can allay all of your fears on that. We think we have a very healthy financial projection right now.
And I'm sure
And the document that you're talking about that showed a $96,000 negative fund balance, I've never seen it.
Okay, I'm sure Mr. Tay can go over that with you very easily and more welcomely than, it'd be good. So I just, I want to hear if you can put together documentation on these 6 items and at least get them in front of us and talk with Dr. Cash and his staff to try to work out something on these 6 that is doable without the May 1st date in it.
And I'm hoping that our conveyance is clear, that we would very much like to do that. We'd very much like to discuss and collaborate to make those possible. What we question is it really appropriate that all of these conditions be preconditions of renewal, that if any one of them is not met, it subjects our charter to revocation, and that's the fear that we have. Can we find common ground where we provide you with all the information, provide the district with all the information that they need? Not in that context? My answer to that is yes, and we're very willing to discuss and negotiate on that.
Ms. Parker?
I just have a quick follow-up question on your financials, and that is, do you work with Nancy Dow in terms of your budgeting, or who do you work with?
No, we're locally funded right now. So that means that all of our funding comes through the Santa Barbara School District,
So you
except for fundraising money.
you just provide the information, and you don't do a self-analysis on it, and you didn't do a self-analysis for the charter petition?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by a self-analysis, but we do we're audited every year. We do a self-analysis every year with regards to our expenditures and fund balance and so forth. Again, providing a 3-year projection is not a problem. What we'd like is to make it part of our normal interactions, requested and it shall be, and not have it be part of a condition for a charter renewal.
Okay, thank you.
Does that